Hello, everyone. This is the Charleston chapter of the FANG, the Financial Executive Networking Group, and tonight our speaker is Ben Pinto. Ben comes out of the Thomas Edwards Group. He's a Texas A&M Aggie graduate. He's smiling there. The only tidbit I pretty much know. Um, Ben started out in the finance area, and including the Big Four, and has been in recruiting side for quite a while. And Ben, I'll let you take the rest of it from there.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you to the Charleston chapter. It's a pleasure. I wish I was there live. It would be a lot more enjoyable to be there. Although I would have had to come today because I wouldn't have wanted to miss that total eclipse yesterday. So that was really quite amazing. And Roy, thank you for your service. I mean, you and your voice, man, you got a voice. You got the golden voice of radio there. I wish I had that.
Thank you, Ben. That's very kind of you. Yeah, I think I missed my calling. I should have got into radio and been the next Howard Cosell.
Hey, it's never too late. And notice I said voice for radio. I didn't say face for radio. So just
No.
just to want to go on record.
Understood. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate it. So yeah, I started my career in public accounting, went into industry. And in 1998, I actually found myself maybe in similar shoes to some of you. That is, I was in transition, and it was quite honestly, and getting real fast. I was it was a tough time. I was pretty discouraged, and I think if I'd had been aware of all the different opportunities and organizations like FANG that were available at the time, it would have been really helpful. I had no idea of the existence of FANG at that time, so appreciate the opportunity. And one of the other things I didn't really know a whole lot about was recruiters. I mean, I'd gotten a call from some, like probably all of you have, and at this point in your careers, you're probably much more familiar with recruiters. But I kind of this titled presentation of recruiters lifting the curtain, I kind of envision the scene from Wizard of Oz when Toto's pulling back the curtain and you're seeing the wizard back there working all the levers and everything. And that's a little bit of hopefully what we kind of do a little bit is just pulling back that curtain and letting folks understand a little bit about how in particular contingency firms work, but we'll touch a little bit on the retained as well. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. We're gonna, I think, monitor questions. Hopefully, get to the questions at the end. Leave hopefully plenty of time for questions. If you'll just put them in the chat, Scott's agreed graciously to monitor those and make sure we cover them. And I'm certainly happy to stay on as long as I need to make sure everybody's questions are answered. Again, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. And you know what? I noticed actually, here I am in Dallas, and I noticed, I think David Rapier. I don't know, that could be a more common name, but that was one name I recognized actually from the Dallas area. So David, I don't know if you're the same David Rapier from Dallas, but good to have you. So I kind of shared a little bit about my my experience here. Let me see if I can make sure I'm going to this. Oh, see here. There we go. Jump ahead to the slide. So, as we talk about a search plan, that's a word you've heard before in transition, but it's really important to build out a search plan. And when you think about that, you're thinking about your network. And probably at this stage in your career, you've really built that up. And it's best to really organize that in whether it's Excel or some other type of application, but just being able to keep track of it and really approach your search like a project, right? And this kind of helps you do that. And so as you're building out that network, you're thinking about the recruiters. And one of the things I've heard somebody talk about networking, thinking of it almost like an investment portfolio. And you think about your network, your friends and family, people who know you really well, know you best, your neighbors. Then you get into business acquaintances, and then you're kind of left with maybe some other just going to events and things like that. But it's really important to prioritize that like you would your investment portfolio, and really spending time with different groups. And so the people you're going to probably spend the most time with are certainly those that know you best, really trying to tap into their network on a greater scale. And then managing that, right? Managing how frequently you are reaching out to them, connecting with them. And that's where that, whether it's an application or Excel, just keeping track of those. So, kind of, hey, it's been a while since I've talked to this person. I need to reach back out to them. And then you've got your networking groups like FANG and certainly some of the other professional organizations and boards. And recruiters, I like to say we fit into that network. We should be considered as an extension of your network. I think it's really important to to consider them like a partner in this search process. And so as you're thinking about your recruiters, you really kind of want to know, okay, who are these people? Are there people you may have been dealing with? I'd be curious, maybe you can throw it in the chat, just if you've had some recruiters that you've dealt with for, your whole career or 20 years or 10 years. Those are the types of relationships. I've been doing this now for 25 years. And that's been just a joy to follow somebody throughout their career and work with them over that long time. So I think you really start looking at recruiters not just as a transactional relationship, but really a partner in your business career. So really, when it comes to recruiting, there's two different types of recruiting firms, right? There's the retained search firms, and then there are the contingent search firms. We'll kind of uncover the good and the bad and the ugly, hopefully, of all this. But let's first look at the retained model. So when you think about retained search firms, maybe everybody's kind of familiar with the term SHREC, right? Those are the big five international retained search firms: Spencer Stewart, Heidrick and Struggles, Russell Reynolds, Egon Zehnder, and Korn Ferry. So those first letters is the acronym SHREC. So that's how they kind of come up with that, for those that didn't know. But those are certainly reputable firms. It's a little different. They are generally, the way they really work is they're paid up front, or really it's a guarantee payment. They're going to charge a 33% fee generally. That's 33% of the salary and really the compensation plan. Maybe not the long-term incentive plan, but certainly the short-term and any signing bonuses and salary. But they're going to collect that fee upfront, 1/3 of that upfront at the time an engagement is initiated. So a search is started. So they're going to collect that upfront 1/3, and then upon the first delivery of candidates, generally they're going to recognize the next third of that and collect that. And then, regardless of whether that position is ultimately filled, they're going to get the balance of that final third, even in an unsuccessful search. If you think of it that way, they may decide to pull the plug on the search altogether. They may find somebody internally, whatever it happens to be, but they're going to get their fee. So they're really incentivized by the client. They're not necessarily interested in establishing so much of a relationship with the candidates as maybe, say, the contingent firm works. So let's look at that. Let's look at the contingent model, right? This is contingent upon the successful placement. So you're not paid. That's the type of firm Thomas Edwards Group is. We've done maybe a small percentage of what we would call a contained, which is kind of a mix. It's actually receiving a engagement fee up front, maybe a small $5,000, $10,000 engagement fee up front, and the balance is due on the successful completion of that assignment. And the way we generally have set up ours is we've made that engagement fee even 100% refundable if our client felt like they didn't feel like they received good quality candidates in the initial start of the process. So, but that's a small percentage of what we do. 95%, 98% is strictly contingent search. We get paid only upon the successful hired start of a candidate. So, and really within the contingent model, there's actually two different types of firms, and they're both serve their purposes. There's one is a volume model, and then the other is more of a relationship model. And volume model is not meant to be any type of derogatory term. There's a lot of times where contingent firms are needed in a volume setting, right? You think about some of your large companies that might be constantly looking for uh, maybe field staff, or maybe it's a technology firm that's just looking to build an enormous team of developers or something like that, where they are not necessarily interested in having a relationship, or having a company that has relationships with its candidates. That's really what it is. I think both those are interested in having a relationship with the client, but not all of them are interested in having relationships with the candidate. And that's really where the big difference comes from. Let's look at that a little more too. So the volume model, I mean, they're not looking to build relationships with those candidates. They may spend only a matter of minutes interviewing a candidate just to get the basics. What are the salary range? Are they authorized to work in the U.S.? That kind of stuff. And then they're just sending candidates to these clients that are looking for candidates. They're really not expecting the firm to do a whole lot of due diligence on the candidate. They just want to see volume. They probably are sending those into a candidate tracking software, and somebody in talent management might be going through those candidates and just funneling them through the good ones and sending them on to the client. And a relationship model, I mean, we're really getting to know our candidates, and that's a big difference. A big key is getting to know those candidates, and with getting to know those candidates, you have a much greater likelihood of a successful placement. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but just again, looking at this slide, the retained search firm, they're not marketing candidates. They are going after specific, oftentimes a short list of candidates that the client has identified. They may talk to candidates that apply for a job, or get connected to them, right? Like, I know I've referred people to some retained search firms, and they may or may not contact them. It's good to be in their database. There's a real value there, but you may not get what I would call a real interview, or even a meeting with them. But they are subject matter experts of their client. They know them really, really well. They've got a researcher that's usually done lots of diligence, not only on the candidates that they're pursuing, but also on the client. So they know lots of deep thoughts and questions about those clients. They will always have a fee agreement. Like I said, they're actually getting paid up front. A contingent firm, again, volume model versus a relationship model, they're marketing candidates. They're getting to know the candidates more so on the relationship model, but those volume models are definitely marketing candidates. They're just sending them. May not know them as well, but they're sending them to those clients. Generally, they're going to talk to the candidates. They're interested in a volume of interviews. Hey, if we talk to enough candidates, we're going to find the right fit. We're going to find good candidates if we just talk to enough of them. So they're definitely interested in talking with them. They may or may not be a subject matter expert on the client, and they may or may not have a fee agreement. Our firm, we're more of a boutique relationship-based firm. We're going to always have a fee agreement in place before we send any candidates to a client. So now, from a again, keeping in mind that this is a commission-based, particularly really on the retained or contingent. They're on the contingent firm, it's heavily commission-based. On the retained side, there is certainly a large salary component to the way they're compensated, but both are equally focused on serving the client. That's what their goal is really. Our candidates don't pay fees, right? So now there are firms that I think do that as well. They actually will maybe charge a fee. I've never been a huge fan of that. I just feel like, hey, there's when you're not working, in particular, that's when most people are in a job search, is either not working or in fear of not working, or maybe just ready to look at something different. The last thing they really kind of want to do when the unknown is ahead of them is have to pay, a $5,000 fee to some firm that says they're going to market them to, maybe strategic opportunities. I've heard people, and you probably all know somebody who's it's actually worked out well for, but My feeling is, hey, work your network. That's the best thing you can do. But it is a commission-driven job, so that's what's really driving. Again, this is really pulling back the curtain. This kind of lets you know a little bit more of what's going on. I like this slide. There's a lot on it, but as you're kind of thinking about, hey, a job order, that's just what we would refer to as a search. So when we get a new search, or new search is identified, get a call from a client prospect, maybe it's somebody we've had a relationship with before and they've landed a new company and they're looking to build out their team, replace somebody, something like that. We may have an initial call. These days, post-pandemic, we're doing a lot of that via Zoom, but ultimately we're going to want to meet in person with that client, especially if that's a hybrid or an in-office opportunity. But we're going to negotiate a fee agreement, certainly find out all the particulars about the opportunity, right? Hey, what's the title? What's the base salary? The benefits? What are the work hour expectations? The location? Do they have a hybrid policy? What is it? There are multiple locations. Why is it open? Why is the position open? What do they have any direct reports? What's the benefit of actually going out and seeing that client is you hopefully can get an opportunity to know a little more of the personality of those direct reports. Who does it report to? Do they sponsor? All those kinds of things in addition to the job description, right? So we're kind of going through and understanding all of that in a preliminary call with a client, and then negotiating the fee agreement. We want to make sure that that's nailed down before we're sending any candidates, because our fee agreement generally provides protection. If they hire one of our candidates that we've presented, then we're going to get our fee. Excuse me. So that we're going to meet with them. We're conducting one of the things that a lot of people don't realize. Hey, as a contingent firm, we're establishing new relationships with new candidates all the time. We are forever searching and looking for candidates, because we've got maybe 75 to 100 searches going at any one time. So we've always got recruiters looking for candidates, and unique to us maybe, but we meet with our candidates. Oftentimes multiple people may meet with a candidate. As a contingency firm, that's a little bit unusual, but we've got these interviews ongoing. We're sharing the details. Once we get all that information from a client, we're going and sharing those details with our entire team. So we've got an entire team focused now on what is that client looking for, what are the keys, and looking for candidates for that client. And so literally, our Dallas team is made up of maybe 25 recruiters. We got another five or six in Fort Worth, and a few in Austin. So we're Texas based, so that's kind of our model. So hence we're not doing much nationally, because we want to build those relationships. We want to be able to meet with our candidates and our clients in person and have those long-term relationships. But then once we've shared that to the team, then I feel like it makes us a little unique, but I'm sure every firm kind of has a search plan that they work, right? There's certain levers that they're pulling, right? Whether it's posting jobs to certain websites, it's using LinkedIn Recruiter to reach out to certain candidates. It's utilizing their network that they've established and built. So we've got those kinds of activities going on all the time amongst that entire team. And it's well documented, so that it'll ensure that it's consistently every search is kind of going through the same type of plan, right? Whether it's utilizing LinkedIn, it's going to, quite frankly, we've shared it with FANG groups, right? Where we want certainly the Dallas and Fort Worth FANG groups to make sure that they know, because they've got their members that they're wanting to be able to get somewhat visibility to for those jobs, right? If we're working a CFO search, we want our Dallas FANG, Fort Worth FANG to know about it in the event that one of those members is a good fit for it. So we've got those where we've got a database of 100,000 plus candidates as well. So it's quite possible that it may be something we have to source for a new candidate for, or quite possibly, and most often the case, it's somebody we've already got in our system. Maybe they just haven't been as actively looking as they had in the past. And so, that's the importance of maintaining those relationships, staying in touch. And yeah, so and as I mentioned, we got 75 to 100 other searches that are in progress that we're doing. We're also conducting the interviews, right? Not only our internal interview with new candidates, but we're facilitating the interviews with our clients. So that's something else the recruiter's kind of doing behind the scenes. And every one of those involves a prep. It involves a debrief following that interview. And so if you've got multiple stages, then there's more preps, more debriefs, more understanding. Is this meeting the candidate's need for a new opportunity, or is it meeting the client? So that we're doing the debrief with candidates at the same time we're also doing debriefs with clients. So there's a lot of work that goes that's involved before we ever fill a search, and quite frankly, before we ever get paid, right? That's one of the things that 95% of the work that we're doing is, I tell our team all the time, we work for free until we actually make a placement. So that building of that database of 100,000 candidates, it's going to happen whether we get a placement or not. I mean, we're building that now. We got to be able to keep the lights on and do that sort of thing. So we're collecting fees in the midst of all that, but we may place 10% of the candidates that we meet. So if we're interviewing 100 to 130, we may make 10 to 13 placements a week, right? I mean, that's kind of the way the numbers kind of work. So not every candidate we interview are we going to place. I think the statistic is like 85% of candidates land through their network, but our actual fill ratio is actually pretty high. We're on the perm side. I think the national average is somewhere around 20%, and we're close to 40%. But that helps because we've got a lot of exclusivity. But then, of course, then now we've negotiated offer, which is also a very delicate process. And then after the job is filled, we want to celebrate with that client and that candidate. We want to make sure we're checking in, making sure that everything is going smoothly. Like a lot of firms, we've got a guarantee period, but we're not in the business of just making it through that guarantee period. For us, success really is having a client delighted, absolutely delighted, not only from the experience of working with us, but by the candidate. So that having that relationship is really important. Candidate marketing, I mean, a little bit about candidate marketing. We will, like I mentioned, we do interview candidates, and then we actually utilize the candidate's resume. I know a lot of firms will kind of put a profile together or kind of customize resumes. We like for our clients to see the work product of our candidates, and so resume is maybe the first and maybe the only sometimes work product they'll see before they hire them. So they get to see the when we market a candidate, we're marketing their resume. We also do a write-up, and so it's to your advantage to really be known by your recruiter so that they're kind of putting forth the best presentation as they can for you. One of the things that's and then some of this will lead to kind of questions that you want to be asking recruiters that you're working, right? Is how do they handle ownership of candidates? Some firms will have very basically almost have no ownership of candidates. They may own the clients, but candidates may all be free game for anybody, any of the other recruiters. But in our firm, we really want that relationship and it to be ongoing. So we actually have call it candidate ownership for life, where that candidate really gets to know that recruiter really gets to know that candidate, and that recruiter will always be thinking about them when new jobs come out. Because again, when we share a job with the team, a new search, the first thing they're doing is getting that out to the team. Well, that's when that relationship kicks in. That recruiter that knows you is going to be thinking of you because you've done a good job of kind of being a a good partner with them, making sure they know what you're looking for and what you're hearing out there in the market, or maybe it's maybe you're networking with them because quite frankly, you've probably all received calls from recruiters about jobs that weren't a fit for you. And you've said, some of you say, well, I'm not interested. That may not be something for me. And, well, hey, do you know anybody that might be interested? Well, if you're the type of person that's sharing those names, well, then that's really, really beneficial for that recruiter. And that ends up, they end up really kind of feeling a little bit indebted to you as a candidate, and they kind of want to work extra hard for you to try to find that opportunity. So I think that's a real benefit to having ownership in essence for life. I think is a really good thing. Another, pulling back the curtain a little bit, recessions and downturns has always produced kind of an increase in bad behavior. A few examples of that might be, candidates. I know some companies, some recruiters will want to market candidates to clients without having a fee agreement and also without even getting the candidate's permission, in hopes of getting a interest in getting a job search to work. So I think that's something just to be really mindful of. As a candidate, you want to make sure that that's not happening with any recruiters that you'd be working with. Another example of a bad behavior would be some companies, some recruiting firms will ask for references up front. And sometimes that's fine. Maybe they have the best intentions. Some firms will use those as basically a call list, right? Hey, this is an opportunity for me to either get more candidates or potentially these are hiring managers. If there's somebody's reference, then they're probably been a hiring manager or they are a hiring manager, and they can utilize that as a job prospect for more business. I always caution candidates to really protect their references. Make sure that, some firms, Thomas Edwards, we don't check references until we get to an offer stage. And so we don't ask for them until then. Occasionally, again, rare percentage, a client may want to check a reference before making the offer, but that's generally late in the process, and both candidate and client are feeling pretty good about it. So recruiters, benefits. We've talked a little bit about this, but I really think some of the real benefits to working with recruiting firms, you've got access to more jobs. As I mentioned, probably our firm generally has roughly about 75 to 100 searches going. Again, they're not going to all be CFO or controller level searches, but hey, a lot of them are. I would say most of our searches are six-figure searches, and that's good to at least know about a firm that's working a lot of six-figure searches. If nothing else, hey, they probably are a good source of referrals for other people, and it's good to network with them. I know I doesn't necessarily mean I can help every candidate, or that I can place every candidate, but I can help every candidate. And I feel like we get to do that through making some introductions to other, key contacts out there in the market. So, in the Charleston market, I'm sure there are some key networkers that it makes sense to know, and hopefully the best recruiters know who those contacts are and can at least make some introductions. But those recruiting firms are going to have access to more jobs. There's the other things that go along with that I know provide our candidates with briefing, prepping for an interview, debriefing with them, helping them kind of understand what's going on within the client, coaching them if we see some maybe some bad habits that they're doing, or maybe their virtual background is maybe questionable, or maybe they need a virtual background because their real background's questionable. Whatever it happens to be, but giving them some coaching like that. helping them secure the interview. I mean, recruiters are incentivized to place you, right? They really want this to work. And so as we might be able to leverage that relationship with that client. Hopefully we've made significant deposits in that relationship such that that client trusts us. So oftentimes if anyone's able to stretch a client to make them notice a resume or notice a background, it could be that recruiter that has a great relationship. Let's see, making a hard match work. Yeah, that's sometimes we get to be the bad guy, right? We can be the person in the middle that is asking those questions on behalf of our candidate and or our client, right? I mean, there may be, I feel like we only win if the client and the candidate win. So if we know that a candidate needs a certain number in terms of a salary, well, we can be honest with our client and let them know that. And without that just idea of negotiating, we're able to leverage that relationship because we've had a history with them and be honest with them about that, and maybe help bridge that gap, get a little more flexibility, or maybe it's through negotiating a signing bonus or an increase after 6 months or something else like that. So just trying to finesse those hard matches, or maybe it's the fact that somebody doesn't have that industry background, but we've known this candidate for years, and they've been able to ramp up quickly and learn a new industry, and we can speak to experience with them regarding that. Sometimes it's potential contract opportunities can come from these recruiter relationships, right? I mean, I know not every firm does both. Maybe some do more contract and consulting type of projects, and some may just do straight direct hire perm type placements. We happen to do both, but so a firm that does both, that might be an opportunity for you as a candidate to get an opportunity to generate some cash flow and income through a contract opportunity. Maybe even experience maybe it's a contract to hire situation where you get to go in and actually experience what it's like with working with a client before making that permanent decision. And then of course the salary and package negotiations, kind of touched on that too. How many firms? It all depends, but we kind of feel like, if you're seeing enough activity and getting enough calls and action, generally 3 is probably good without stepping on toes. If you're working with some boutique firms, chances are there's not a lot of overlap because a lot of those boutique firms may be working exclusive searches. Certainly the retained firms are working exclusively. So, it's not a bad idea to be on the radar of as many of those retained firms as you can. And there are boutique retained firms and probably some specific there in the Charleston market. But I would say definitely there, more on the contingent side, where there could be a little bit more overlap, is probably limiting more to 2 or 3, but gauging that based on how much activity you're kind of seeing in terms of interviews. And I mean, if you're getting calls all the time, then hey, you may not want to add another recruiter to that group. You're probably getting plenty of opportunities to hear. But I definitely recommend meeting. Got a typo there. Sorry about that. Meeting them face to face, not fact to face, but face to face. So, virtual is great, but as I've been telling my team, I mean, it's convenient and easy, but you're not going to really establish the type of relationship that you would establish if you're meeting someone in person. Whether it's breaking bread or grabbing a cup of coffee, whatever it happens to be, I think we've been seeing more and more, particularly of our CFO and controller candidates coming into the office, and I love it. It's an opportunity for them to meet multiple people within the firm, for them to be a real person and get some coaching. And so when they see their name mentioned for one of those new searches, more people know them. And so I think there's a real benefit to meeting people in person and meeting them face to face. So my encouragement would be is, hey, if they've got an office, go try to sit down and meet with them and pick a day that, if they're a hybrid office, I mean, our policy is a hybrid policy, but man, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are our busiest days with people in the office. Thursdays next to that. Fridays Fridays would not be the day I'd be telling people to come to the office. So you really want to get some good face time. Let's see. All right, some do's. Let's talk about some do's and don'ts in working with a firm. Choose the right firm, right? Reputation. My guess is you've worked with some in the past that you would recommend, and you've probably worked with some that you wouldn't. Make sure it's a fit with your background, right? As CFOs and finance executives, make sure that that's the type of jobs that they're working. Those are the types of clients that they're working with. And again, face to face whenever possible, and into multiple visits too. I mean, you might do a Zoom interview. You can be really efficient with a Zoom interview, and then maybe suggesting, hey, let me come to the office and meet with you in person, grab a cup of coffee. That gives you the opportunity to hopefully meet some other people. But I would definitely recommend trying to do that. And then treat him or her with respect. I mean, they're there to partner with you. Treat it as a normal interview. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times where I'm interviewing someone and they'll tell me something and they'll preface it with, well, I wouldn't say this on a real interview, right? Well, treat it like a real interview, I mean, because your interview with us is confidential, but now we do have some information that, and so, deal with them with respect, treat it as a normal interview, professional, tell the truth, right? You want to make sure that you're being truthful. Being positive as well is really important. Again, keep in mind, you're trying to establish a long-term relationship. So you meet, you stay in touch, find out how often they want you to touch base. What's the preferred method? And how can you help recruiters? Referrals, right? If you've been treated with respect as a candidate and you felt like they actually listened to you and they're not wasting your time with jobs that you wouldn't, that you told them specifically, don't call me about. Okay, think of them as a partner, and maybe this is somebody that you could refer to somebody else. That's generally how I get most of my candidates, are now through referrals. What not to do? Well, don't expect too much. As I mentioned, we may actually place 10% of the candidates that we interview, but we can help them all, right? So, I mean, recognize that maybe if they're trying to give you some advice, whether it's about the resume, or interviewing tips, or the virtual background, any of those kinds of things, connecting you with other recruiters, right? They may say, you know what, I know another recruiter that you should meet. That's their attempt. They're trying to do everything they can to help. I do think they're ultimately, they keep in mind, they do want to place you because that's the way they pay their bills, they put food on their table. But don't expect too much. They can't return every call, right? I mean, if you're calling to check in with them or sending them email, I know I've always kind of shared with candidates that, look, hey, email is a great way to stay in touch with me. Let me know you're still looking and you're still on the market. It keeps you top of mind. It's generally for me personally, it's kind of a running to-do list. And so I generally want to respond to everybody, but I might not be able to respond to that one immediately. But it generally stays in my inbox. If you're like me, so you scroll down and you're like, oh, I need to respond to that. And it's kind of got a shelf life. That email has a greater shelf life than that voicemail, right? Mixing in a voicemail is great because you might catch them live, but an email has a little stronger shelf life. So, I think that's a good way to kind of stay in touch, but don't expect them to always respond to every email. don't tell other recruiters about the jobs that the recruiters told you about, right? I know we share, again, we'll share the name of a client with candidates when we feel like, hey, they're definitely interested, and the nature of the relationship has a lot to do with this. Is this somebody I've been dealing with and working with over the years? I know I can trust them to keep it confidential rather than going and sharing, but that it kind of protects our livelihood. If we're sharing the name of a company and you know the perfect fit, and you go and tell them, well, there's nothing to stop them from just going to that company and applying directly, maybe. Well, that kind of costs us the opportunity to feed our families, right? I mean, that's kind of the way to look at it a little bit. You know, help them out by maybe referring them to the recruiter. Don't let, and I mentioned this earlier too, don't let them send your resume carte blanche to clients. You really want to control where your resume is going. And unfortunately, there's some of this bad behavior will take place, and it ends up costing you. It kind of, if all of a sudden your resume is out there and all over the place, then you meet with a recruiter that actually has a great relationship with that client. They're unable to represent you because your resume is already in somebody else's system, and somebody else is already technically representing you by doing that, and you may not even have given them permission. And then, yeah, don't go around the recruiter. I've actually had that happen to me before, where I'm reaching out to a candidate and sharing the name and all about it, because they're asking all the right questions. They're definitely giving me the interest that they're interested in the opportunity. And just before they give me the permission to represent them, they'll say, oh, you know what, let me think about that. And unfortunately, then what they did is they go around and reach out to that client directly, because now they know the name of the client. Maybe they know somebody there. Well, but for the information that I shared, they probably wouldn't have made that happen. So just, you know, honor that relationship. Some good questions to ask. You know, I think this is all fair game when you're working with a recruiting firm. Is this a new client, or have you been working with this client for a long time? You know, tell me about that. Tell me about your experience with this client. Have you made placements with them before? Or are they still there? Are they still with your client? You know, just understanding how deep is that relationship with that company. And again, hopefully you're working with a recruiting firm that'll be honest. If somebody reaches out to me and say, hey, I saw this job at XYZ company, are you working that search? I'll be honest. I'll say, no, we're not working that search. We may not be the best in, but hey, look at my LinkedIn. Let me see if I know somebody that might know somebody, that kind of thing. If we're not working the search, I'll be honest with somebody. And we generally, as a firm, don't cold call. So it's not like, hey, I'm going to take that and just go try to cold call that company. I mean, we're generally working in relationships that we have. You know, do you have a formal agreement with the client, right? Hey, if you don't have an agreement, then you really, you know, what good is working with them if they don't have an agreement with that client? Now, we might be able to get that agreement if you're a great candidate and we've got a good relationship. Then there's a good likelihood that with your help, we might be able to get that agreement in place, just because you've got a great background for it. Kind of what's the policy the firm has for following up with candidates? I know I mean, I'm sure you've all kind of been there where you feel like you've kind of been called about an opportunity, maybe even given permission. Hey, yeah, send me for that job. And then you don't hear anything back, right? That's the kind of behavior, you know, that hopefully you're not, you know, you don't want, right? You want to be working with a firm that's going to follow back up with you. Hey, yeah, I want to let you know, Scott, that client, you know, they just didn't like this part of your experience, or they're looking for a little bit more of this, or, you know, looking for this industry, whatever it happens to be, right? So they're, you know, getting that kind of feedback, or certainly after an interview. I've even heard candidates share that sometimes after an interview, they don't even hear back from a client, you know, assuming that, okay, well, I mean, from a recruiter, that, hey, that means that, okay, I probably didn't do well on the interview, but at least call and hopefully get some feedback about it, right? So make sure, find out what their policy is there, if they follow up with their candidates and give them that feedback. You can check references on the recruiting firms as well, just by asking some of your colleagues out there in the market. And how often should I stay in touch with you, right? Yeah, that's a great question to ask a recruiter. Some will say, hey, you know what? I feel like we've got a lot, and there's a good likelihood we'll have a lot of activity based on your experience and all this. Hey, you may want to stay in touch with me a little more frequently. Hey, check in once a week. If you're really kind of passively looking and looking for a real special search, well, then maybe that's going to be less frequently, once a month, maybe once every 3 months, if you're really passive, and just say, hey, look, this is the opportunity. I'm really happy where I am, but man, if you get this opportunity with some equity, that's what I'm looking for. So just being mindful of that and understanding. So just kind of recapping, again, understanding what motivates the recruiters, right? We're motivated. We want to build the relationship. We want a good, solid relationship with our candidates and our clients, and we want to make a fee, right? We get paid on commission, and so it's only if that placement happens do we get paid. Then that's kind of motivating us, right? And generally, a recruiter's got a lot of different things that may be closer to the money than others, right? So if we're working a lot of searches that are really close, then that new relationship might get on the back burner, but we still want to form new relationships with candidates. So, and in terms of some of the things that recruiters looking for, traditional resumes, I know that's our preference, typically with the timeline, the chronological resume, with the most recent job first. I like to see, in particular, based on level of experience, maybe a 2-page resume, possibly 3, but I tell people, you think of your resume like a movie, and the first 3 inches is your trailer. So I really like to see a really strong, call it trailer, that professional summary that really sells you. It's maybe 1 or 2 sentences and then a series of bullets that really oftentimes are checking boxes as to why you're a fit. You think about I think they say it's something like 8 seconds that the average person looks at a resume, and you're either put in a yes pile, a no pile, or a maybe pile. And you want to be in that yes pile. The quickest way to the yes pile is a quick, on quick glance, you check many of the boxes, right? That's software, that's industry, or at least in our profession, right? That's software, that's industry, that's credentials. So like a CPA or an MBA. It's seeing some tenure, right, in that resume, that more progressive, traditional progressive. It's right now, it's PE. Lots of people want PE experience. So that's those are some of the things that people are looking for. And then if I know some people will say, hey, well, I just want to show the most recent 10, 15, maybe in some cases, even 20 years of experience. I don't want to go back beyond that. I like a complete resume, kind of cite our accounting principle of completeness, and just add a line at the bottom, just says, other experience includes, and then you're being complete. And some of that other experience might be really valuable, right? I mean, it could be, maybe a start in public accounting in your career, like in my case, or it may be progressive experience in a different industry, that you want to make sure and highlight. So anyway, that's something, a good way to put that on there. And of course, key accomplishments in the resume. That's, people are hiring to solve problems, and accomplishments are the way you highlight the problems that you've been able to solve for companies. No negativity. I mentioned being positive. So just be mindful of your tone and kind of what you're saying. You kind of want to make sure if it was a negative experience, well, try to turn it into a positive, right? Hey, you know what, this, company and I just didn't see eye to eye. We decided to separate. I'm excited about my next opportunity, and here's what I'm looking for. Kind of a lot of times people want to go into lots of details as to why they left their last job or one of their previous jobs, and it can really turn negative fast. So I think it's really important to try to stay positive, and move on to what you're really running to, rather than making it sound like what you're running away from, if that makes sense. And being prepared. So treat it like an interview. Um, you generally know what questions people are going to ask, right? I mean, they may ask them in different ways, like, what are your strengths, or, hey, what do you do better than other people? You kind of know what people are going to ask. And so there's nothing wrong with rehearsing those answers, role playing. I mean, that's an opportunity really with recruiters. Once you're in their system and you've been interviewed, there's opportunities to role play with a recruiter. I know I've done that from time to time with candidates. But rehearsing your answers, knowing how you're going to respond, because you can anticipate the questions that they're going to ask, and having stories for each bullet on your resume. They could be the same stories for multiple bullets, but having some stories really help sell. And then having questions. I mean, it's good to be prepared, and questions are a great way to kind of demonstrate your preparedness. And certainly just being prepared for those interviews that the recruiter gets for you, right? You want to do a great job. You're representing the firm. I know my candidates represent me when they go out there and on a client interview, and I want I want that client to be delighted, going, wow, that was a great candidate. I mean, they may or may not be able to hire them, but hey, that's still a great candidate, and that was really time well spent. That's kind of what I want, both candidate and client, to feel like, hey, that was a really good opportunity. So I kind of running through a lot of that, but I hopefully left some time for questions. And like I said, I'm happy to stay on as long as anyone needs me to. And I don't know if there's any questions. I've been monitoring chat. Scott, did you see any questions?
So there aren't any in the chat, but in the meantime, why don't everybody go, if they have any questions or comments, put them in the chat. In the meantime, I've got some things that I jotted down, and we can go through those while we're accumulating some other questions. So one of the things, Ben, that you said at the beginning was to manage your network. Both, I think, from overall networking and trying to find those hidden jobs, but also networking to find recruiters, and then of course, as a business owner, you need to network too.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is the right frequency to follow up with recruiters?
The frequency to follow up with recruiters?
Yeah, like, I've talked to you on February 1st. How often should I follow up with you?
Well, a lot depends on how actively you're looking, right? If you're actually in transition, not working, I'd say you're looking to want to follow up at least every couple of weeks. And that may not be a phone call. It may not be a live conversation. It might just be, that email brand of, hey, just wanted to reach out, know that I'm still looking. What are you seeing out there? I'd love to hear what you're seeing out there in the market. What are you chasing? Is it, asking the question, hey, what are you working on that I might be able to help you with, right? Are you looking for some referrals at some different levels, right? Again, the challenge with the executive level position is, right, it's the top of the pyramid, right? And there's just fewer of those. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's vying for those same positions, and that there just are fewer of those. But I think, I know when someone is working and maybe more passive, it might be, if they're really not in an active search, it might be every 6 months. I'm just reaching out just to stay in touch, right? You think about a relationship, right? If you're not actively looking, you might just want to say, hey, just checking in with you. Are you seeing anything interesting? Was just wanting to stay in touch. But if you're actively looking, I'd be wanting to at least reach out. I might not expect to have that live conversation, but maybe every 2 weeks, be at least touching base. Hey, I'm still looking. This is what I've seen. I got an interview. I mean, I'd like to hear from my candidates that are actively looking to know what they're seeing and what
Mhm.
because if I know that they're going on an interview or a second interview, then I can maybe even offer to help. Hey, well, is there any way I can help you prepare for that? I mean, again, I'm interested in my candidates' success, whether it turns. I mean, ultimately, it's a relationship, and so I don't see it as just a transaction.
But on the other side, follow up to that question, on the other side of that is, what is way too frequent of a follow up to the point where they annoy the recruiters?
Yeah. Again, it's in the tone and the way you're doing it. I mean, that could be every 2 weeks, depending on how the tone of your check-in, right? If somebody feels like they're expecting a response every time, then that can get like a nuisance, right? It really can. But certainly, there's no need to reach out unless you're actively talking about a particular search. Um, then you don't need to be. You certainly don't need to be reaching out weekly. It might be. I mean, you might go. Like I know on our contract team, they move really fast. You could be interviewing a candidate and talking to them later that day about an interview, and then you're debriefing. So you could have lots of those kinds of conversations. But if it's just checking in,
Yeah.
man, weekly is borderline too often unless there's the tone is such that,
Okay.
for instance, what, here's a good example. We have what we call our available list. That's kind of those are actively looking candidates that are open to projects. And so, because those move really fast, we will reach out to them every 2 to 3 weeks. So those are actively looking candidates. So I would say that's probably a good frequency. Think about 2 to 3 weeks, if just so that people know that you're actively looking and still
Yeah.
on the market. And so I think that's a good gauge for maybe a good rule of thumb of frequency.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another one I had was related to if once you place a candidate,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is there what is the time frame like? Well, that person leaves in 30 days or 90 days. What's kind of the normal thing that you see where you would give a refund? I know you talked about a refund kind of, or maybe it's a credit.
Credit.
But what's kind of the normal process there if somebody leaves, and what reasons do you typically see for people leaving that quickly?
Hmm. Um, yeah, various reasons these days. I think standard guarantees are generally 90 days, oftentimes prorated, right? Like, hey, something in the first 30 days, maybe 100%. Next 30 days, it's 50%. The last 30 days, it's 25%. That tends to be kind of the standard
Okay.
on the contingency firm, um, uh, basis. Um, as far as reason, sometimes we actually had one happen just recently that was a high level search, and they went through multiple interviews, like more than 5 rounds of interviews, and then once the person was in place, I mean, they hired them. Check-in calls were good, and probably about, say, 6 to 8 weeks in, there was kind of a personality thing. It was just this: hey, this personality is not going to be a fit for our firm. And they in that case, the client took a lot of the responsibility. They said, I mean, they're still in a guarantee period, so we're going to honor that. But they were like, hey, we did multiple interviews. I don't know how we missed that, right? It was kind of one of those things. But then in the market we were having in 21 and 22, it's slowed down a little bit. I mean, it's still moving. We're still seeing new searches every week, double-digit new searches every week. But it's slowed down from 21 and 22. Those were both record years for our firm. But people were leaving because of I mean, they were getting other offers I mean, it was just like a bidding war, and okay, they just landed, but then now they're getting another opportunity that maybe they had in play before they landed, um, that they just had to make a decision. Well, they continue to work that sometimes, and now they got an offer, and so it's more money, and so I'm going to leave. So that's a reason we've seen people leave. Yeah, and sometimes there's things that are just beyond people's control, right? My spouse got transferred, and so I got to do that, or some life change event. Those are things. But typically, if it's in the first 90 days, it's usually the personality or the skill set really wasn't as strong as what they thought, right? They really expected their expertise in Excel wasn't as they demonstrated or claimed in the interview, and so that can be part of it.
Okay. So you got this one twice. I had this on my list, and Roy also asked, "What's your opinion on whether to include your graduation dates on your resume if you are 50 plus years old?"
Yeah, I don't think graduation dates on the resume for school is necessary. I mean, again, I think you're trying to be complete in your resume. So you got, if you got your degree, make sure you got your degree. But I don't think you necessarily need to have the graduation date on there. But I also think, don't try to. I don't think people should try to position themselves as someone in their 20s if they're in their 40s or whatever it happens to be, right? I mean, I don't want to work. Personally, I wouldn't want to work for a company that matters, right? I mean, I want people hiring based on skill set and experience, and certainly that's what we screen for. We screen for for skill set, not for people can say I want somebody with 3 years of experience, but the role dictates the pay, and you're trying to find a fit within their organization. But if it's I mean, I don't think you need to have that on there, especially if they can tell you're based on your experience that, you didn't just start your career.
So that's how they find out is because you feel they should have a complete resume, so they're going to be able to tell when they graduated, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it may not have years. So when I talk about like that other experience on the resume, like I might, at 35 years of experience now, right? 35. Yes. So 35 years. So I might not go into great detail on my, earlier experience, but I might put something like, I might go through 25 years of my recruiting experience between basically two companies. And then I might say prior experience includes, audit in big, audit in Big Four with Ernst and Young, and some sales and financial planning experience with a auto industry company or something like that. I won't put the date of those. It'll just say other experience, but they know by seeing 25 years of experience, they know they're not getting somebody with 10 years experience.
So Scott, while we got a break there on your questions, I'm just curious, Ben, you guys sound like you're a pretty large firm, and you're talking about doing 100, 130 searches. I think it was a week.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just and when you put something out and you've got a couple hundred resumes coming in, and I don't know if you're typical of the maybe medium-sized or larger firms, but who's actually doing the initial review on these resumes? Do you guys use the bots to do that, or are your recruiters actually doing it? Because you could be sending your resume in for something that you're absolutely a fit for and never hear back. So I'm just curious as to how you guys approach that.
Yeah. So just for clarification, we may have 75 to 100 searches going on at any one point in time. So we might, I think last week we got something like maybe 15 new searches, Dan, and thank you for your question. Like maybe 15 new searches last week, let's say. So So you think about the life of a search, roughly maybe 6 to 8 weeks, oftentimes from start to finish. I mean, depends on how fast clients move and how challenging search. But so you think about it, okay, we got a inventory of 75 to 100 searches going on. The candidates, so those ads are out there for in any job that you see on our website. We're not that large of a firm. I feel like we're a boutique. We got 3 offices, maybe roughly about 35, 40 employees total between those 3 offices. But those interviews, so candidates might be applying to those jobs. We don't use bots. It's recruiters that are responsible for going through those interviews, and you can always apply directly through the website. And so then you're at least in our firm, you're actually engaging with the recruiter that's responsible for that search, and they can look at your resume. Now they may choose, if they get all these applications, they got to filter through those and come up with, okay, which interviews which ones am I going to start with, right? I'm going to look at those, scan those resumes the best I can. I'm going to contact the best ones I see, and I'm going to schedule some interviews. And so our generally interview candidates, each recruiter might interview anywhere from 5 to 10 interviews a week as our firm. And again, keep in mind, our interviews are generally pretty robust in the sense that we're spending probably at least an hour or more with the candidate to do that interview. Whereas, some firms might do 25 interviews in a week, but they're really just 15-minute phone screens, understanding salary, are they a fit? Do they have some of the credentials and all that? So, I mean, in the second part of your question, Dan, you'd asked, what was the second part of your question?
I was just, how you can get yourself past that initial phase of getting your resume chosen.
Yes. So trying to be, what I would say is try to be a human being, right? Don't just, apply, maybe try to figure out, hey, you know what? I mean, my phone number's on this presentation, right? You got a phone number you can call. Hey, Ben, this is Dan, I sat in on your presentation. I noticed you had this, CFO position posted out there, and I think I'm a good fit for it. Well, do you get a call back? I mean, at least you've gone an extra step. How many people are going to do that? Most people are just going to apply email or,
right.
Or LinkedIn message. Try to be a live person with a voice, with a tone, and actually have the conversation. And, I mean, if that happens for me, I'm calling them back. It may not be great news. Maybe, hey, you know what, this is what they're targeting. It's, or, hey, that job is it already at offer stage or something, right? But at least you're trying to form relationships with recruiters that'll call you back. Great question.
Follow up to the age question before from Edwin here. How do clients feel about age? In some networking groups he's in, he's heard that over 50 is a liability.
Oh, I hate the sound of that as one over 50, but I think, you know what, it's human nature, right? There's gonna be people that discriminate because of age, and there's gonna be those that don't. And I think what oftentimes people are stereotyping age. They're assuming somebody in their 50s or over, or maybe they're not as savvy technologically, or they're not, or they really, they're not going to be there longer term, right? But that's stuff you got to find out and be able to demonstrate, and that's an objection that you just have to be able to overcome. I think demonstrating energy. I mean, I've heard some great tactics of everything from having an Apple Watch, when you go on that interview, or I mean, just trying to say, hey, look, you know what? That's somebody that's at least is on technology, right? Or being a lifelong learner and doing some of those kinds of things. But I think it's human nature. There's always going to be companies that do that. But that's where the relationship hopefully can kick in. Is if you've been working with somebody, say, hey, you know what? I know you want somebody that's going to be there long term. Trust me, you know, Scott's going to work until the day he dies, man. He's not leaving this company except on a gurney.
All right, great answer. Thanks. What's your assessment of the current job market?
My assessment, I like what you're doing, Scott. I mean, you're kind of doing this fractional CFO stuff. Well, because I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's a gap between what I would call experience and you know, and the resources. I mean, I think what we saw the pandemic. I did a presentation actually this morning, a different presentation, but it was one of the graphs that I showed was the number of people not in the workforce from pre-pandemic to pandemic to post-pandemic, and it's something like 4 million people left the workforce. You know, post-pandemic. I mean, so the number of people not in the workforce, that is, they're not working and they're not looking for a job. So easiest to think about, retired, maybe you know, someone who's decided to stay at home, taking care of kids, whatever, something like that. It was 96 million at the pre-pandemic. It jumped up to 104 million at the peak of the pandemic and dropped back down to about 100 million post-pandemic, and it's kind of hovered at that level. And I think what we saw in 21 and 22 was the immediate attempt to replace that 4 million people through massive hiring, right? I mean, people were just trying to get their jobs replaced, and so I feel like there's people that have left the workforce. Certainly in our professions, as the accounting and finance, fewer people are going into the industry. So I think there's just going to be this need for project consulting based type of work, because the work has to get done. I mean, you know, again, I've done this through some recessions, and in good times and in bad times, you need accountants. You might not be looking at the future, you know, so the FP&A side may not be as critical in some cases there, or at least from a critical hire standpoint. But you got to have good numbers. Your bankers are hounding you. You got to have good numbers. You got to close the books. I just feel like the market, it's strange. This market is strange because stock market's been hitting records, and yet, you know, there's still jobs out there that, I mean, there's still people, it says there's still jobs out there, but people seem to not be hiring right now. It seems like it's slowed a lot. And that could be because it was moving so fast. It's like when you're going down the highway and you're going 90, and all of a sudden you think you see a cop and you slow down to 70 and you feel like you're just standing still. I mean, that's what I feel like maybe we're doing, because we're still seeing about, I think we had like 15 new jobs last week, right? So that's, you know, in 2019, that would have been good. You know, that would have been a good, hey, that's a good clip for us as a firm. But after 21 and 22, just feels like, gosh, there should be more. And I still see some of the graphs still showing there's still more jobs out there than people. But you know what? We know that some of those jobs are restaurants, right? A hospitality industry where they can't find enough workers that want to do that type of work. I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged because I think there's just, it's got to pick back up. I think people are waiting. Now here we're in an election year, right? And so that sometimes you start to feel like, okay, are people going to be like, oh, let's wait till the election? I'm hoping that, because we actually know what life's going to be like no matter who wins this election. So it doesn't matter which side you're for, we know what it's going to be like. So hopefully people won't be going, let's wait till the election's over.
So this is a hot topic today. Is your firm using AI? And if so, how are you using it?
You know, that is a great question. we have really not utilized AI. I'm ashamed to say in some ways. I mean, it's been one of the things our management team's been talking about is, hey, we got to probably have some, I'm sure, not from a firm wide practice, we have not done any organized use of AI. I'm sure some of our individual recruiters are probably utilizing it in terms of maybe coming up with a job description or writing an ad individually. But we have not been, I mean, like I said, no bots are going through resumes. I mean, we'll use the job boards like Zip and certainly LinkedIn Recruiter, but using Zip and Monster and some of those, and those may be employing some AI in terms of generating, moving candidates to us, but we're not necessarily doing anything on, specifically on our side. I know there are firms that are probably utilizing it a lot more.
But yet you still have a lot of searches going on every day. So it sounds like what you're doing is working for you.
Well, it is working for us. I mean, what we're impressing upon our recruiters is when things are a little bit slower, which I'd say it feels like it has been a little bit slower, is this is the opportunity to, intensify your relationships, right? Is strengthen those relationships with your candidates and with your clients. And so we're just encouraging people, hey, that's what you want to do. And that's what I would say for candidates as well is try to be working with firms that are actually interested in having a relationship. And understanding how you can help them. You once you've established that relationship, then that gives them a little more. They're a little more able to push their clients to maybe, if you're a little outside the box in terms of a fit for a particular job, they can stretch that client, and they're willing to do that because they've made a lot of deposits. You've made a lot of deposits in them, and they've made deposits in you. They're making deposits in their client, and so that's an easy ask. Sometimes it's, once you've had that longer term relationship.
Another question here. This is an interesting one. So if you get if you see multiple recruiters on a job board for the same position, is there a good way to choose a recruiter? How should you choose which one to represent you?
That's a great question. I would. I mean, again, it could start with just applying to both of them and seeing which one responds, right? And then it's asking some of those questions. I gave you just some sample, but there's nothing magical. It's what do you want to know? Some of you guys are asking some great questions right now. It's just understanding how they work. How often should I, reach out to you? Some might say, oh, you don't need to call me. I'll call you, right? Don't call me. I'll call you. Well, that's great, but I've been there. I've been in a job search, and sometimes you want to take some control. And you know what? I can't control when I get a call, but I can control when I make a call. And I'd rather, I want to be able to check in and at least hear a live person tell me they don't have anything right now. I'd rather hear that than wonder, if there is anything, right? I mean, so I would say interview them, ask them, hey, what kind of clients are you working with? Like I would tell you, hey, most of our clients are small mid-market companies. They're generally not the big companies in the city that, people think of. I mean, here in Dallas, I mean, we've done some work with Toyota, since they moved here, but not a lot. 7-Eleven, we've done some work with them. But again, not a lot. Most of our clients are companies that you probably wouldn't necessarily know. They're mostly privately held, private equity backed firms.
Getting back to networking a little bit, if you're doing the job search right, you're doing a little bit of working with recruiters. You're also doing job boards. You're also doing networking to uncover those hidden jobs. Mm-hmm. So for the people that have networked into the company, and then the company actually comes to you and says, "Hey, we got this person that came directly to us. They found us through an employee or whatever it may be, and they give you the resume. Do you like getting the resumes from the company, or would you rather actually find them on your own?
That's an interesting and a good question. I, we don't too often get candidate resumes from the company. Occasionally, we'll be working a search that the client wants us to completely handle the search. So if they do, they'll funnel some of those to us, and they'll still expect they'll still expect to be billed a fee if we place one of those. But most often, I mean, most of the time, I would say that's rare in our business. If a company has access to a great resume that's a great fit for the job that they have posted, they're going to hire them and not pay a fee, right? I mean, that's in their best interest. I feel a little bit guilty if I'm taking a fee for a candidate that I didn't find. I mean, I might still do some work, right? I got to facilitate, and so that can justify it, and I can see, and especially if we've done a lot of work up front to get there. And like I said, it's happened before, but I'd probably feel funny billing a client for a candidate that they found on their own.
Well,
yeah, I've had times where people have approached me and they've found me on LinkedIn, and then they've said, we want you to talk to our recruiters. So it may not be as uncommon as it might sound.
Right. If they've paid a retained firm,
right.
I mean, they'll definitely, retained firm will, I mean, a company would just send the candidates because they're already paying them, right? So like, hey, they don't want to have to screen them. They don't have to do any of that work. And I'd say, that's why I'd say I'd be happy to do all that. But the retained firms, you're right, Dan, that's the way they'll work.
but I was going to say, maybe you didn't find them, but you're still doing all the prepping the person and everything else. So you're still doing a lot of the work, if they were almost most of it, probably. So
thank you, Scott. I'm going to send you a fee agreement and we'll get you registered, and I appreciate that.
and I actually have been one of those people that have been given to the recruiter because I found it through, just networking into people.
Yeah. I mean, short answer is, hey, I'm grateful for anybody who refers candidates to me. And because that's the way we build and establish relationships. So I'm happy to do that. I would feel a little funny taking a fee, but
that's it for questions. But I did have one thing that I found very interesting that you said today, that during the I think it was the bad times or whatever, the bad things that happened, that recruiters,
bad behavior. Yeah.
The recruiters actually use your references to get other sources. That is not something I've heard before and would have ever even thought of. So very, very interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I'll occasionally will still get a resume from someone, and they'll have the references in there in the resume, and I'm like, oh my goodness, get that off your resume. I mean, especially if they've got it posted or anything like that. I mean, you got to protect those references. You don't want references getting unsolicited calls from recruiters that, I mean, again, I talk about kind of protecting those references and preparing those references. Hey, you've asked for them to be a reference, and now you want to protect that. You don't want them being called unnecessarily, because if they start getting lots of calls, well, hey, Scott, I know I said I'd be a reference for you, but how many jobs are you looking for? Because I've gotten 25 reference calls and in the last 3 days.
Wow. So we're running short on time here. We got two more things here. Number one, I want to remind everybody that's a FANG member to contribute, if nothing else, to pay Charlotte's salary, and I'm sure she would appreciate that she gets paid. And then one more question: what is the percentage? And I'm going to say no more questions at this point because we're right here at the end. What is the percentage of remote versus on-site that you see now?
Again, most of our clients being small mid-market companies, very few remote, less than less than 10%. I mean, probably 5% are remote. Now, most of what we see, the other, call it 95% are hybrid. We do have a lot of clients that are 100% in office. And then we have, so roughly about half, let's say half of the clients are 100% in office, and about the other half are hybrid. Very few remote jobs. We've got a few technology because we do accounting, finance, HR, and information technology. So we've got a few IT searches that are 100% remote, but that's rare for us to have those. I wish we had more, because I mean, that's what it seems like that's what the candidates all kind of want. But I'm an in-office guy, so I kind of like in office. I like hybrid.
All right. Well, Ben, thank you so much for
Yeah.
the time tonight, and we got a lot of questions. We took over a half an hour on questions, so
Good.
there was a lot of interest in what you talked about tonight, and we appreciate you taking the time. And Roy, one more time, I'd like to say thank you again as we wrap up tonight for your 5 years of service, and for making this an easy transition for me.
Well, thank you, Scott. And Ben, thank you for a quality presentation. Very enjoyable, very productive, and good luck.
You're very welcome. Thank you. And I scrolled over to my first slide just because it had my email on there. So if anybody did have a question, they didn't get it asked, feel free to email me that question. It's pretty simple, ben@thomasedwards.com. And I'm happy to answer any of the questions. So really appreciate y'all. Appreciate what y'all do. I mean, FANG, we're huge fans of the FANG, and I think what y'all are doing is great. And again, I wish I would have known about it in 1998, or maybe I don't, because then I might not be in the recruiting field. Who knows? Thank y'all very much. Y'all take care.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.